Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Sewing with Shalancia. My name is Shalancia Daniel and I am the director of a really cool nonprofit organization called the Creativity Shell. So, on this Saturday morning's project, we are going to be making this really cute heart in a heart donut pillow. I designed this project because January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and one of the projects I used to work on was I used to teach sewing classes in sex trafficking shelters that housed children who were survivors of sex trafficking. I love hearts because I think that one of the biggest catalysts of human trafficking is love. I think that there are a lot of children who are looking for love and they're looking for affection. And a lot of times that gets exploited by traffickers who use it as a means to control them and to enslave them. So, a lot of projects I like to do for human trafficking usually has hearts in it because I always used to try and tell the survivors that I worked with that there are people out there who really care and really love them. This particular project, this heart in a heart donut pillow, is a project that you can make. It's a project that you can give one heart to somebody else and you can keep the other. Or if you are an instructor and you're looking for a fun project to teach survivors in trafficking shelters, I highly recommend this one. It is a very fun and very easy project to make. So once we go through all your materials and supplies, let's get ready to sew. To make this really cute heart in a heart donut, you need two jumbo hearts. One color that is like a camel color, or if you want to use a brown to make a chocolate donut, you can do that. And then another color that is nice and bright that you can use for your frosting. To save yourself a lot of heartache, we will trace our heart into the donut first, and we will sew this heart before we cut it out. This way, we can keep the fabrics together, we can get a really great heart imprint in here, and then I will show you how to remove it and use this heart to make a cute heart pillow. So first, you will place your first heart on your table with the bright side facing up. And then you are going to place your frosting heart right on top of it with the bright side facing down. I guess I really should say when you do trace this heart, trace it on the non-bright side of your fabric. That way you can use the bright side for your donut. And like I said, depending on the fabrics that you're using, you definitely want to not cut this heart out first. And if your ends are not lining up 100%, it is okay. Let's just make sure that this heart is nice and smooth, and we are going to pin it and pin these two fabrics together so that when we're sewing, it is not shifting around too much on you. These fabrics can get really thick and fluffy, again, depending on the fabrics that you're using, if it's a felt, if it's a fleece. I'm using on my camel fabric, this is a kind of upholstery fabric that it has a nice pill to it. So it'll make me a really fluffy donut. I'm going to put a couple of pins just on the outside also, really again to hold these two fabrics together. I don't want them shifting around as much when I'm sewing because I really want to get a really great heart sewn in here, so when I do cut it out, it is really awesome. Okay, Your heart is all pinned. Let's start sewing it. Whenever I'm sewing a heart, I never like starting on the points, either of my center points. I like starting on the sides. Sometimes it's better if you can start on a straighter edge. That way, when you get to your curves, it makes it a little bit easier to ease into them. You do not necessarily need to backstitch on here, but like I always say, it's a good practice to get in the habit of doing so, just so that when you do need to do it, you don't forget. And this fabrics, like I said, my fabrics are so thick, so you definitely want to use your hands to help this machine out as you're going around your curves. Again, you can see my hands. I'm just gently just curving along with the machine. When the fabric starts to bunch up, I'm just using my hands to smooth it out. When I get to my point, I want to stop. I want to do a really good pivot, so I have a really great point in my heart. And to pivot, you lift up your lever, you just do a slight turn, you put the lever back down, and you continue sewing. And as the fabrics are bunching, again, these are stretch fabrics. This is a fleece I'm using combined with an upholstery fabric. They are not the best of friends. They will look fantastic together once we finish sewing, but it is a really tricky sew because the pile on that upholstery fabric is working kind of like a velvet fabric, and it does not want to lay flat. It is fighting against my machine, but we are doing this and we are almost there. I'm at my bottom center point. I get to my center, I stop, I lift my lever, a slight pivot, and I'm back on track, almost back to my starting point. And remember, you do not need to leave an open space here. We are going to close this heart all the way up. I went over my stitching point just a little bit. Like I said, this is why I did not backstitch to start with, but now that I'm here, I'm finishing, and I'm going to just backstitch a little bit, and I am finished this first part of my heart. I'm going to cut and remove my fabric. Now go ahead and remove all of your pins. And just use your hands to hand press this heart out. And we are going to now fold it in half. I'm folding it in half because I do need to cut this, and I'm only going to use this half point to make a slight incision. I'm cutting about a good 1/2 to 3/4 inch away from my seam line. And I'm not going to cut it in the halfway point because just in case something doesn't line up, I really want to use this negative to make myself a smaller heart pillow, so I want to preserve as much of this outline as possible. So I'm gently going to cut all the way around. When you get to your pivot, you want to just give a good slice. Don't try to do a curve cut. Just stop and start again. You want to go around your curves and back to your starting point. Here is your heart negative that you can use to make your smaller insert pillow. Now that you're at this step, since we do not need to preserve this heart anymore, let's just go ahead and slightly clip into this heart. We want to ease up some of this fabric. It is really bulky, it's really thick. I'm not sure exactly what fabrics you guys are going to choose for this, These thicker fleece fabrics, they do look the best, really tricky to sew, but once you're finished, it just makes this a nice and soft donut pillow. But you can have a little bit of trouble sewing in this fabric, especially if you're used to sewing cottons. And then once we're here, we're going to flip it inside to give us a nice smooth edge. You might need to work with this a little bit. Pull these out. And we are almost there. One of the rules I always say when I'm sewing is that if you are making something and one side seems bigger than the other, in this case, just with the pull of my fabric, my top fleece came out bigger than the bottom one. This is absolutely okay, but when you start to sew it, just always remember to sew from the smaller side so that you can see what you're doing and you don't have a lot of holes left over. So what I'm doing right now is I am going to just repin this heart together. Although the inside of this heart is sewn, the outside is not. But instead of sewing it right sides to bright sides and turning it over to the dull side, because this fabric does not fray, we are going to top stitch it, and we'll use the excess fabric from top stitching as our decoration. So you want to pin it just all the interior all the way around, and then we are going to top stitch this heart. We want to leave an opening so we can stuff it with some fiber fill to fill it up, and then we'll close up this opening once we are finished. I'm also giving myself a very generous seam allowance. I'm going to use about almost an inch of a seam allowance, not even including this excess fabric, because I just want to make sure that as I'm going all the way around, if there's any shifting between this fleece and this very tricky upholstery fabric, I have all my bases covered. I'm looking here and there's a slight, again, I'm not really pulling the fabric too much. I don't want to buckle the heart on the inside. I just want to make sure that as I'm sewing all the way around that I have both of these two fabrics sewn so there's no holes in my heart donut. You get to your point, you're going to stop, you're going to give yourself a good pivot, well defined, and start again. can hear my machine fighting against this upholstery fabric. It does not want to be sewn, but we're almost there. I'm going to leave about a good 6 inches of an opening so I can get some fiberfill into this and fill it up and close it up shortly. Once you have finished your top stitching, you want to go ahead and take out all of these pins. And we're almost there. Once you flip this over, remember this fuchsia is going to be more of like the frosting for your donut. So if you have any excess of this brown fabric in here, you can go ahead and cut that off now at this point. And you can now get some fiberfill and stuff this up to fill it up. The first thing that you want to do is get into the top of this heart. It gets a little tricky. If you need a poking tool, you can grab one to help you with that. And you want to just do little bits of fiberfill at a time. You don't want to do too much because it makes it too difficult to stuff. And start filling the other side. Just little bits and pieces as needed to go around and fill this up. You can see I'm just getting my arm in there, which is why we left such a large opening. So once your heart donut pillow, the exterior, is all stuffed, we still have the opening right here that we want to go ahead and close. And remember, my pillow, my frosting on top is a little bit larger than the fabric below. So when I put it under my sewing machine, I want to go ahead and stitch it from here just because I will not be stitching it blindly. And if you have too much stuffing in here, it makes it a little bit more challenging to close this open hole. So just use your hands and stuff all of it in as much as possible. And you can also use a pin to just hold this fabric in place. And to just get all of this under my machine, I'm going to lower my presser foot. Definitely going to give myself a good back stitch just to make sure that I have secured this stitch. And you want to use both of your hands. This is a lot of fabric and a lot of stuffing. Your feed dogs can definitely help with this, but you need to help your machine out and gently guide this fabric along so that you can close up this opening. And when you're finished, again, give it a good back stitch and you are finished. So now the exterior of your heart is complete. We can definitely do some decorating to it a little bit later, But first, we are going to put this heart aside and we are going to start working on the smaller heart insert that goes inside your project. To make this heart, we want to lay your one side of your heart on the flat surface, bright side to bright side. And then we are going to lay the frosting heart right on top of it, bright sides to bright sides. Somebody says sometimes when you're working with a fleece fabric, how can you tell which side is the bright side and which side is not? It really is subject to interpretation, but the way that I use and I tell is the non-bright side is usually a little bit more flatter, more pressed down, and the bright side is a little bit fluffier. And if you can see the slight color difference in between the two fabrics, then the side that is brighter is the side that I'm choosing for my bright side. And I find with these two particular fabrics, because my fleece has a lot more stretch than my upholstery fabric, even when cut exactly the same, it wants to stretch out just a little bit more. So I'm going to sew this fabric from this side just because I feel like it'll just be a little bit easier under my machine. And when I'm sewing hearts, let's use this side as our opening. So we'll start from here, we'll go around, stop and pivot, and just continue going around, stop and pivot. We will use this side to turn over to the bright side and to stuff. And my back stitch. And again, these fabrics are really thick. I'm going to have to really help my machine out as much as possible. Right here, it's kind of pulling and getting caught. I'm just going to lift my presser foot and just be mindful of that and keep going. I'm trying to use the width of my foot as my seam allowance, but again, the fabric is just getting kind of stuck under my feed dogs, and I'm just going to have to be very mindful while using my hands to get that around there. I'm going to stop and pivot. Check that nothing has shifted or moved. When you're working with stretch fabrics, they can be a bit of a pain because they're very hard to control, but you can do as best as you can by really holding on to this. And again, sewing curves is not the easiest thing. You see my hands, I'm just holding onto it as best as I can and just letting it flow through the curve and around the machine. Getting down to my pivot point, I'm going to stop, lift my presser foot, slight turn, and keep going. Again, if this fabric starts bunching up, you just lift your presser foot, get it back under there, and then you keep going. Here's my opening, just a little back stitch, and I am going to cut my threads, take it out of the machine. And to turn it over, you're just going to use that opening and gently just push everything inside over to the bright side. Get your fingers in here and just push all of this excess fabric out of the way. You can see that you've clipped these edges. Your curves are looking pretty good. Your heart's looking pretty good. There's no holes. We didn't miss any areas while we were making this, except for the opening that we have here. And now your interior heart is ready for some stuffing. Once we have this stuffed, you can fold this edge together. You can either hand stitch it closed or you can place it under the sewing machine to close it up. For this particular part, I'm going to opt to hand stitch it instead because these fabrics are so thick, it just makes it a little bit trickier to place it under the machine. So I'm just going to use my hand sewing needle and a nice crochet thread that's nice and thick to hand stitch this area closed. Awesome, we are almost there. Our exterior heart is complete, and so is our interior heart and a heart. At this time, if you want to decorate this donut, this heart and a heart donut pillow, you can cut some felt fabric and you can use your glue gun to glue it on top, add some sprinkles to it. This exterior flap of the fabric, you can leave it like that, or you can clip into it to decorate and just make it part of this decoration. This is a really cute project. You can have so much fun with how you choose to deck this out. When you're finished, you can give the heart to a loved one. You can keep this one for yourself, or you can keep these both together. But I really hope that you guys enjoy this really fun project of this heart in a heart donut pillow. Thank you guys so much for sewing with me. These adorable hearts, they're so soft, they're so much fun to make, and I just love how you can deck them out and decorate them, and you can do it in so many different ways. I just cut up some excess fleece that I had around into little squares and just kind of glued them on here with my glue gun. If you guys want to find out some more about the Creativity Shell, please visit our website at www.creativityshell.org. Thank you.